The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, translated by George Long. Book 11. These are the properties of the rational soul. It sees itself, analyzes itself, and makes itself such as it chooses. The fruit which it bears itself enjoys, for the fruits of the plants and that in the animals which corresponds to the fruits others enjoy. It obtains its own end wherever the limit of life may be fixed. Not as in a dance and in a play and in such like things where the whole action is incomplete. If anything cuts it short, but in every part, wherever it may be stopped, it makes what has been set before it full and complete, so that it can say, I have what is my own. And further, it transverses the whole universe and the surrounding vacuum, and surveys its form, and it extends itself into the infinity of time, and embraces and comprehends the periodical renovation of all things, and it comprehends that those who come after us will see nothing new, nor have those before us seen anything more, but in a manner he who is 40 years old, if he has any understanding at all, has seen by virtue of the uniformity that prevails all things which have been and all that will be. This too is a property of the rational soul, love of one's neighbor, and truth and modesty, and to value nothing more than oneself, which is also the property of law. Thus then, right reason differs not at all from the reason of justice. You will set little value on pleasing song and dancing and the pancantrium, if you will distribute the melody of the voice into its several sounds, and ask yourself as to each if you are mastered by this, for you will be prevented by shame from confessing it, and in the manner of dancing, if at every movement and attitude you will do the same, and the like also in the matter of the pancratium. In all things, then, except virtue and the acts of virtue, remember to apply yourself to their several parts, and by this division to come to value them little, and apply this rule also to your own whole life. What a soul that is which is ready, if at any moment it must be separated from the body, and ready either to be extinguished or to be dispersed or to continue to exist. But so that this readiness comes from a man's own judgment, not mere obstinacy, as with the Christians, but considerately and with dignity, and in a way to persuade another without tragic show. Have I done something for the general interest? Well, then I have my reward. Let this always be present to your mind, and never stop doing such good. What is your art? To be good. And how is this accomplished well, except by general principles, some about the nature of the universe, and others about the proper constitution of man? At first, tragedies were brought to the stage as a means of reminding men of the things which happen to them, and that which is according to the nature of things that will happen to them, so that, when you are delighted with what is shown on the stage, you will not be troubled with that which takes place on the larger stage. For you will see that these things must be accomplished as so, and that even they bear them who cry out, O Cythetrium. And indeed, some things are said well by the dramatic writers, of which kind is the following especially. Me and my children, if the gods neglect, this has reason too, and again. We must not jail and fret at what happens, and life's harvest reap like the wheat's fruitful ear, and in other things of the same kind. After tragedy, the old comedy was introduced, which had a magisterial freedom of speech, and by its very plainness of speaking was useful in reminding men to beware of insolence. And for this purpose, too, Diogenes used to take to these writers. But as to the middle comedy, which came next, observe what it was, and again for what object the new comedy was introduced, which gradually sunk down to a mere mimic artifice. That some good things are said by these writers everybody knows, but the whole plan of such poetry and drama, to what end does it look? How plain does it appear there that there is not another condition of life so well suited for philosophizing as this which now happens to you? A branch cut off from the adjacent branch must of necessity be cut off from the whole tree also. So too, a man, when he is separated from another man, has fallen off from the whole social community. Now, as to a branch, another cuts it off, but a man by his own act separates himself from his neighbor, when he hates him and turns away from him, and he does not know that he at the same time cut himself off from the whole social system. Yet he has had this privilege certainly from Zeus, who framed society, for it is in our power to grow again to that which is near to us, and become a part which helps to make up the whole. However, if it often happens, this kind of separation, it makes it difficult for that which detaches itself to be brought to unity and to be restored to its former condition. Finally, the branch which is from the first grew together with the tree and has continued to have one life with it, is not like that which after having been cut off is then engrafted. For this is something like what the gardeners mean when they say that it grows with the rest of the tree, but that it has not the same mind with it. As those who try to stand in your way when you are proceeding according to right reason will not be able to turn you aside from your proper action, so neither let them drive you from your benevolent feelings towards them, but be on guard equally in both matters, not only in the matter of steady judgment and action, but also in the matter of gentleness towards those who try to hinder or otherwise trouble you. For this also is a weakness, to be vexed at them as well as to be diverted from your course of action, and to give way through fear, for both are equally deserters from their post, the man who does it through fear, and the man who is alienated from him who is by nature a kinsman and a friend. There is no nature which is inferior to art, for the arts imitate the nature of things. But if this is so, the nature which is the most perfect and most comprehensive of all natures cannot fall short of the skill of art. Now, all arts do the inferior things for the sake of the superior. Therefore, the universal nature does so too. And indeed, hence is the origin of justice, and in justice the other virtues have their foundation. For justice will not be observed if we either care for the middle things, or are easily deceived and careless and changeable. If the things do not come to you, the pursuits and avoidances of which disturb you, still in a manner you go to them. Let them then, in your judgment, be put about them at rest, and they will remain quiet, and you will not be seen either pursuing or avoiding. The spherical form of the soul maintains its figure when it has neither extended towards any object, nor contracted inwards, nor dispersed, nor sinks down, but is illuminated by light, by which it sees the truth of all things, and the truth that is in itself. Suppose any man shall despise me, let him look to that himself. But I will look to this, that I be not discovered doing or saying anything deserving of contempt. Shall any man hate me, let him look to it, but I will not be dissuaded. I will be mild and benevolent towards every man, ready to show even his mistake, not reproachfully, nor yet as making a display of my endurance, but nobly and honestly, like the great Phoenician, unless indeed he only assumed it. For the interior parts ought to be such, and a man ought to be seen by the gods neither dissatisfied with anything, nor complaining. For what evil is it to you if you now are doing what is agreeable to your nature, and you are satisfied with that which at this moment is suitable to the nature of the universe? Since you are a human being placed at your post in order that what is for the common advantage may be done in some way. Men despise one another and flatter one another, and men wish to raise themselves above one another and crouch before one another. How unsound and insincere is he who says, I have determined to deal with you in a fair way. What are you doing, man? There is no occasion to give this notice. It shall soon show itself by acts. The voice ought to be plainly written on the forehead. Such as a man's character is, he immediately shows it in his eyes, just as he who is beloved forthwith reads everything in the eyes of lovers. The man who is honest and good ought to be exactly like the man who smells strong, so that the bystander, as soon as he comes near him, must smell, whether he chooses or not. But the affectation of simplicity is like a crooked stick. Nothing is more disgraceful than a wolfish friendship. Avoid this most of all. The good and simple and benevolent show all these things in the eyes, and there is no mistaking. As to living in the best way, this power is in the soul, if it be indifferent to things which are indifferent, and it will be indifferent if it looks on each of these things separately and all together, and if it remembers that not one of them produces in us an opinion about itself, nor comes to us, but these things remain immovable, and it is we ourselves who produce the judgments about them, and, as we say, write them in ourselves, it being in our power not to write about them, and it being in our power, if perhaps these judgments have imperceptibly got a mission to our minds, to wipe them out, and if we remember also that such attention will only be for a short time, and then life will be at an end. Besides, what trouble is there at all in doing this? For if these things are according to nature, rejoice in them, and they will be easy to you. But if contrary to nature, seek what is conformable to your own nature, and strive towards this, even if bringing no reputation. For every man is allowed to seek his own good. Consider whence each thing is come, and of what it consists, and into what it changes, and what kind of thing it will be when it has changed, and that it will sustain no harm. If any have offended against you, consider first, what is my relation to men, and that we are made for one another, and in another respect. And I was made to be set over them, as a ram over the flock, or a bull over the herd. But examine the matter from first principles, from this: if all things are not mere atoms, it is nature which orders all things. If this is so, the inferior things exist for the sake of the superior, and these for the sake of one another. Second, consider what kind of men they are at the table, in bed, and so forth, and particularly under what compulsions they respect the opinions of which they are, and as to their acts, consider with what pride they do what they do. Third, if men do rightly what they do, we ought not to be displeased, but if they do not do right, it is plain that they do so involuntarily and in ignorance. For as every soul is unwillingly deprived of the truth, so also is it unwillingly deprived of the power of behaving to each man according to his deserts. Accordingly, men are pained when they are called unjust, ungrateful, and greedy, and in a word, wrongdoers to their neighbors. Fourth, consider that you also do many things wrong, and that you are a man like others, and even if you do abstain from certain faults, still you have the disposition to commit them, either through cowardice or concern about reputation, or some mean motive. You do abstain from such faults. Fifth, consider that you do not even understand whether men are doing wrong or not. For many things are done with a certain reference to circumstances, and in short, a man must learn a great deal to enable him to pass a correct judgment on another man's acts. Sixth, consider when you are much vexed or grieved that man's life is only a moment, and after a short time we are all laid out dead. Seventh, that it is not men's acts which disturb us, for those acts have their foundation in men's ruling principles, but it is our own opinions which disturb us. Take away these opinions then, and resolve to dismiss thy judgment about an act as if it were something grievous, and thy anger is gone. How then shall I take away these opinions? By reflecting that no wrongful act of another brings shame on you? For unless that which is shameful is alone bad, you also must of necessity do many things wrong, and become a robber and everything else. Eighth, consider how much more pain is brought on us by the anger and vexation caused by such acts than by the acts themselves, at which we are angry and vexed. Ninth, consider that a good disposition is invincible, if it is genuine, and not an affected smile and an acting part. For what will the most violent man do to you if you continue to be of a calm disposition towards him, and if, as opportunity offers, you gently admonish him and calmly correct his errors at the very time when he is trying to do you harm, saying, "Not so, my child, we are constituted by nature for something else. I shall certainly not be injured, but you are injuring yourself, my child," and show him with gentle tact and by general principles that this is so, that even bees do not do as he does, nor any animals which are formed by nature to be gregarious. And you must do this neither with any double meaning, nor in a way of reproach, but affectionately and without any rancor in your soul, and not as though you were lecturing him, nor yet that of any bystander may admire, but even when he is alone, and if others are present. Remember these 9 rules as if you had received them as a gift from the Muses, and begin at last to be a man while you live. But you must equally avoid flattering men and being vied at them, for both are unsocial and lead to harm. And let this truth be present to you in the excitement of anger, that to be moved by passion is not manly, but that mildness and gentleness, as they are more agreeable to human nature, so also are they more manly, and he who possesses these qualities possesses strength, nerves, and courage, and not the man who is subject to fits of passion and discontent. For in the same degree in which a man's mind is nearer to freedom from all passion, in the same degree also is it nearer to strength. And as the sense of pain is a characteristic of weakness, so also is anger. For he who yields to pain and he who yields to anger, both are wounded and both will submit. But if you will, receive also a 10th present from the leader of the Muses. And it is this, that to expect bad men not to do wrong is madness. For he who expects this desires an impossibility. But to allow men to behave so to others, and to expect them not to do to you any wrong, is irrational and tyrannical. There are 4 principal aberrations of the superior faculty against which you should be constantly on your guard, and when you have detected them, you should wipe them out and say on each occasion thus: "This thought is not necessary. This tends to destroy social union. This which you are going to say comes not from any real thought." For you should consider it among the most absurd of things for a man not to speak from his real thoughts. But the 4th is when you shall reproach yourself for anything, for this is an evidence of the diviner part of you being overpowered and yielding to the less honorable and to the perishable part, the body, and its gross pleasures. The aerial part and all the fiery parts which are mingled in you, though by nature they have an upward tendency, still in obedience to the disposition of the universe they are overpowered here in the compound mass, and also the whole of the earthy part in you and the watery, though their tendency is downwards, still are raised up and occupy a position which is not a natural one. In this manner, then, the elemental parts obey the universal, for when they have been fixed in any place, perforce they remain there until again the universal shall sound the signal for dissolution. It is not then strange that your intelligent part only should be disobedient and discontented with its own place, and yet no force is imposed on it, but only those things which are conformable to its nature. Still it does not submit, but is carried in the opposite direction. For the movement towards the injustice and intemperance, and to anger and grief and fear is nothing else than the act of one who deviates from nature. And also, when the ruling faculty is discontented with anything that happens, then too it deserts its post, for it is constituted for piety and reverence towards the gods no less than for justice. For these qualities also are comprehended under the generic term of contentment for the constitution of things, and indeed, They are prior acts of justice. He who is not one and always the same object in life cannot be one and the same all throughout his life. But what I have said is not enough unless this also is added, what this object ought to be. For as there is not the same opinion about all the things which is in some way done, or others which are considered by the majority to be good, but only about some certain things, that is, things which concern the common interest. So also we ought to propose to ourselves an object which shall be of the common kind, social and political. For he who directs all his own efforts to this object will make all his acts alike, and thus will always be the same. Think of the country mouse and of the town mouse, and of the alarm and trepidation of the town mouse. Socrates used to call the opinions of the many by the name of the lamina, bugbears to frighten children. The Lacedaemonians, in their public spectacles, used to set seats in the shade for strangers, but they themselves sat down anywhere. Socrates excused himself to Perdiccas for not going to him, saying, "It is because I would not perish by the worst of all ends. That is, I would not receive a favor and then be unable to return it." In the writings of the Ephesians, there was this precept, constantly to think of some one of the men of former times who practiced virtue. The Pythagoreans bid us in the morning look to the heavens, that we may be reminded of those bodies which continually do the same things, and in the same manner perform their work, and also be reminded of their purity and nudity, for there is no veil over a star. Consider what a man Socrates was when he dressed himself in a skin after Xanthippe had taken his cloak and gone out, and what Socrates said to his friends, who were ashamed of him and drew back from him when they saw him dressed thusly. Neither in writing nor in reading will you be able to lay down rules for others before you shall first learn to obey the rules yourself. Much more is this in life. A slave you are. Free speech is not for you, and my heart laughed within. And virtue they will curse, speaking harsh words. To look for the fig in water is a madman's act, such as he who looks for his child when it is no longer allowed. When a man kisses his child, says Epictetus, he should whisper to himself, "Tomorrow, perchance, you will die." But these are words of bad omen. No word is a word of bad omen, says Epictetus, which expresses any work of nature. If it is so, it is also a word of bad omen to speak of the ears of corn being reaped. The unripe grape, the ripe bunch, the dried grape, all are changes, not into nothing, but into something which exists not yet. No man can rob us of our free will. Epictetus also said, a man must discover an art with respect to giving his assent, and in respect to his movements, he must be careful that they be made with regard to circumstances, and that they be consistent with social interests, that they have regard to the value of the object, and as to sensual desire, he should altogether keep away from it. As to avoid, he should not show with any respect to the things which are not in our power. The dispute, then, he said, is not about any common matter, but about being mad or not. Socrates used to say, What do you want, souls of rational men or irrational? Souls of rational men? Of what rational men? Sound or unsound? Sound. Why then do you not seek for them? Because we have them. Why then do you fight and quarrel?